Mephiles the Dark is one of those Sonic characters that many disliked and still do to this day. But in recent years, more and more people have actually looked back at Mephiles, saying that he was a good villain. No, a great villain. And I 100% agree with that statement. I've always had a soft spot for this character, and for this game for that matter, and so I wanted to dive deeper into analyzing his character. I briefly spoke about him in my video analyzing Shadow, but now the spotlight will be passed solely to Mephiles so that I can show why I think that Mephiles is actually a way better villain than people give him credit for. With that said, let's not waste any more time and jump straight into it. To truly understand Mephiles and his character, we must first answer the question, who or what is Mephiles? What's his origin? Where does he come from? Well, 10 years before the events of Sonic 06, the Duke of Soliana, that being Princess Elisa's father, was experimenting on Solaris, also known as the Sun God of Soliana. The experiment goes wrong and leads to an explosion, fatally wounding the Duke and causes Solaris to be split into two beings, those being Iblis, the Flames of Disaster, and Mephiles the Dark. After their encounter at Radical Terrain, Shadow and Silver travel back in time to this point and each give chase. Silver goes after Iblis, ending with the Duke using the Chaos Emerald to seal Iblis into Princess Elise, and Shadow goes after Mephiles, sealing him inside the Scepter of Darkness. 10 years later, Mephiles was released accidentally during an encounter between Shadow and Eggman near the beginning of Shadow's story. So that is more or less the origin of Mephiles. He is one half of a literal god that was formed from a failed science experiment. But let's just take a look at the design of Mephiles before we move into his presence in the story. Having his base form be a semi-reflection of Shadow is genius, not just for story purposes, but for thematic purposes. In a way, Mephiles kind of represents the very early Shadow from the beginning of Adventure 2. The anger, the hatred against humanity, the darker nature of his character. It works on a deeper level if you're willing to look hard enough. It's kind of reminiscent of characters such as Alistair Azimuth from Ratchet & Clank, as he was, in essence, a reflection of a younger Ratchet. He mirrored the young Ratchet's abrasiveness and impatience, and having Ratchet face what was metaphorically a counterpart to his old self helped to show his character development similar to what it does to Shadow, as when Shadow faces Mephiles, it helps to show us how far his character has grown. As well as this, his movement also works well with his character. It's very creepy and almost zombie-like with his hanging arms and slow movement. Even his eyes have this naturally evil look to them. He has this purple glow that follows him, reinforcing that almost demonic presence. And what adds to this even more is his theme, which is this soft piano that slowly swells in intensity that almost makes him seem maniacal. It adds to that fear factor and gives him a greater presence whenever he's involved in any cutscenes. And to top it all off, the voice actor. I don't know who decided to have Dan Green do the voice for Mephiles, but that person deserves a raise because he absolutely nailed it. This voice fits so well. I cannot imagine anybody else doing Mephiles' voice. And his laugh is actual nightmare fuel. Now, many people have problems with the story in 06, and I can see why. I'm not saying 06 has a perfect story by any means. I know it has problems, and I'm able to identify those problems. But what I haven't ever been able to understand is the hatred towards Mephiles. I believe it stems from a misunderstanding of the character, and not that he's just poorly written. The biggest criticism that people say is that Mephiles is just an idiot. You see, his goal is to rejoin with Iblis once again to form Solaris. In the current timeline where a majority of this game takes place, Iblis is sealed in Elise, as previously mentioned, meaning that Iblis must be freed first, and there are two ways of doing this, either to kill Elise, or to make her cry. Oh yeah, I probably should have mentioned that if she cries, Iblis will be released. Mephiles plans to release Iblis via the latter method, and so instigates a plan involving Silver, who he tricks into killing Sonic by saying that Sonic is the reason why the future is destroyed, giving him the name the Iblis Trigger. Mephiles knows that Elise will become very attached to Sonic, so the death of Sonic would cause her to cry, releasing Iblis, who he can then join with to form Solaris. Now, that's quite the complicated plan, but the reason people think it's stupid is not because of how complicated it is, but because Mephiles has the power to time travel at will. So people often ask, why is he doing all this complicated shit when he could just travel in time and kill Elise or kill Sonic? Or even travel to a point in time where he can just merge with Iblis at an earlier stage? Well, I can't say it's a reason to do with time travel affecting the state of the universe, because one of the issues with the story in 06 is that there's no established rules for time travel. So we can just assume that Mephiles should be able to get away with all this. But my explanation as to why Mephiles chooses this complicated plan is just because he's that dark and sadistic and evil. He would do all this just because he can. He would trick a naive hedgehog in the future to travel back in time to kill someone random to him just to break the heart of Elise in order to release Iblis, just because he likes to torture people. He is cunning, he is smart, and he relishes in the suffering of others. He could, if he wanted to, just kill everyone. He has that power, but he doesn't. He likes getting into people's heads and breaking them from the inside out. Even when his plan fails and Silver doesn't kill Sonic, he shows just how cold and ruthless of a villain he can be by traveling back in time and killing Sonic. He actually just casually murders Sonic and laughs it off, knowing that he's won. He made Elise cry. And for those of you asking why he didn't just kill Elise, it's cause that isn't the smart decision in this scenario. Like I said before, Mephiles is smart. He knows that one of the only beings that could potentially stop Solaris is Sonic, so by killing him, he prevents this measure and, as well as that, gets to relish in Elise's despair. His victory here is twofold. Also, he's the only villain to have actually succeeded in killing Sonic. Think about it, every Sonic death other than this one was a fake out, but here, he killed Sonic in a matter of seconds because he just has the power to do so. I think what I also enjoy about his character here is that he doesn't have a motive for all this. He has a goal, but no big reason as for why he wants to achieve that goal. Yes, there's a difference between a goal and a motive, go and look it up. He doesn't have a deep backstory that many can empathize with, like antagonists such as Gerald Robotnik. He's purely doing this because he enjoys seeing destruction. To quote Alfred,
"Some men just want to watch the world burn."
Much like the Joker from that film, he is just an agent of chaos. He enjoys hurting people and breaking them. And having no motive actually makes him more of a threat because you don't know when the destruction is gonna stop. Even when he forms Solaris, he just goes ahead and destroys the universe, leaving a bunch of unstable rifts all over the place in a timeless void. But my argument so far for his character has been limited to his big plan of releasing Iblis, how he tricked Silver and eventually killed Sonic. But there is another person that he interacts with, one person who really shows the true colors and depth of Mephiles, and that character is none other than Shadow the Hedgehog. Mephiles wants to take revenge on Shadow because Shadow, as I previously mentioned, sealed Mephiles away in the Scepter of Darkness. Because of this, we get many interactions between Shadow and Mephiles. The first one is when Mephiles is first released, in which he takes on Shadow's form and teleports Shadow and Rouge to the future. And I just love his introduction here. Just give it a watch.
Oh, how ironic fate can be. I would never have believed I would be resurrected through your shade. I thank you, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Who are you? And how do you know my name?
I'm Mephiles. Mephiles the Dark. What? Did you forget me? I owe much to you, Shadow. Oh, yes. What you gave to me, I now return to you. A one-way ticket to oblivion.
This introduction emanates his darkness, especially with the way he moves, introduces himself, and is backed up by the swelling of his theme that builds up perfectly to coincide with him moving closer and closer towards Shadow. A good introduction. But the next main encounter is really telling of his character. The encounter in Flame Core. I already discussed this encounter in my Shadow the Hedgehog analysis, but now I want to look at how it displays Mephiles and his character. In this cutscene, Mephiles shows a projection of Shadow in the future, but of a defeated Shadow that's been sealed away. He states that humanity turned on Shadow as they feared his power. We see this information is getting to Shadow, and he shows this through his body language, but when Mephiles asks Shadow to join him to take revenge on humanity, Shadow declines, saying that he determines his own destiny. And for the first time, you can kind of see that Mephiles is shocked by the response here. This is more inferred from his body language as, well, he doesn't have a mouth, so really you gotta go off just his body language. He wasn't expecting Shadow to have such an ironclad will. He gets into people's heads and controls them like puppets, similar to what he did to Silver. He's usually the one in control of the situation, but here, he's losing that control, which leads to a fight between the two. Compare this to how he interacts with Silver in Silver's story. In every single cutscene, Mephiles is always in control. Mephiles just tells Silver what to do, and Silver goes and does it. It's only when Silver begins to question whether it's right to murder someone for the sake of a good future, does he stop taking the word of Mephiles. So Mephiles pretty much always had control. But here you see what Mephiles has to resort to when he loses control. He ends up fighting Shadow in this situation, and it kind of makes sense, because if you look at Silver's story, Silver and Mephiles encounter many times, but they don't actually fight. Mephiles and Sonic don't encounter in Sonic's story. It's only in Shadow's story where they actually fight, and you have 2 boss battles with Mephiles. But after this first fight is concluded, we see that Mephiles is still in control. Not mentally, but physically. He is beating Shadow, although Shadow hasn't removed his inhibitor rings yet, which, as we know, greatly increases his power. But from this, we can infer that Mephiles stands a good chance of beating Shadow in a fight. One-on-one anyways. With this in mind, Mephiles could have just fought with Shadow and taken him down in a battle instead of trying to get in his head. But he doesn't. Why? Because he wants to break Shadow's will. Like I said, he enjoys torture and that's his goal. But here he failed to achieve that. At this point, many villains would just give up and just go on the offensive. But not Mephiles. He wants to get his revenge on Shadow, and he's gonna get it on his own terms before he forms Solaris. So, what does he do? Well, he goes through to Omega. He knows that he can't break Shadow's spirit, but the betrayal of one of his closest friends will. When they encounter, he lets Omega shoot at him and then says the following line.
This only proves you were created to stop Shadow, the ultimate life form. Don't tell me you didn't know. You may have been programmed by humanity, but what you did to Shadow in the future, that was your...
And you can see that this encounter got to Omega's head. Mephiles played on the guilt of Omega, and going to the point where he says that Omega defeated Shadow of his own volition, not because humanity reprogrammed him to do so, that was his breaking point. Omega in a later cutscene tells this information to Shadow, and much like before, you can see through Shadow's reaction that this information has reached his head. This time even more so than when Mephiles spoke to him. He even turns and walks away. Mephiles has done it. He's won. He's got to him. Except that there was one factor that he didn't account for, that being Rouge the Bat. Rouge reassures Shadow that she will always be at his side, reigniting Shadow's faith in his friends, and then they go to stop Mephiles, foiling Mephiles' plan for the second time. Through these encounters, you get more of a sense of Mephiles and his character. He could have just fought with Shadow in combat from the very beginning, but he didn't. He chose to take on the near impossible task of breaking Shadow's spirit because, like I said, he's just that sadistic. I think my main gripe with Mephiles is his lack of interaction with Sonic. I wish that there was more of an establishment with their connection as there is with Shadow and Silver, but unfortunately, Sonic and his story are some of the low points of this game. But I'll save that for when I get around to reviewing 06. Or, I guess that'd be more of a retrospective now, seeing as that game is now 15 years old. Christ, time flies. Overall, I think that Mephiles is one of the greatest villains to ever grace the franchise. He's dark, cunning, strong, manipulative, sadistic, chaotic, and just evil. Hell, Shadow said it best when he said,
You have no desire for revenge. You only crave destruction. Your only lust is to fuel Iblis until there is nothing left of time itself.
My favorite aspect about his character has to be the fear factor. Whenever Mephiles is on screen, you feel his presence. He has this ominous vibe and terrifying demeanor. He's always in control of the situation. The only time that control even slightly breaks is when Shadow turns down his offer for revenge. But even then, his master plan still succeeds. Him forming Solaris was an inevitability. It was always gonna happen. It was just a matter of how he was gonna do it. He could have saved time and done it himself, or he could trick a naive hedgehog into murdering someone in the past for the sake of his future. And he picks the latter because he's torturous. He just toys with people because he can. Mephiles is a villain that many are now remembering fondly, and that many wish to see once again. Unfortunately, that's impossible. During the ending of 06, the original flame of Solaris is extinguished, wiping the events of 06 from history. This unfortunately means that we'll never get to see Mephiles outside of spin-offs or mobile games. What I hope is that the writers for the games can learn from Mephiles and create another villain that leaves just as much of an impact on people as Mephiles did. There's a reason that people still talk about him to this day. It's because he is a memorable villain. He isn't as poorly written as Zavok or Infinite, and yet Sega keep pushing Zavok into everyone's faces when nobody really likes him as a villain. There's a reason why Infinite is just called Mephiles Jr. in the Sonic community, but in my opinion, that's slating the name of Mephiles instead of mocking Infinite. It's safe to say a majority of us would want to once again see a villain like Mephiles, but only time will tell if we get that luxury. Well, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, then leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on, etc, etc. If you have any characters in particular that you want me to do an analysis of, just leave a comment and I might get around to it at some point. Hell, it doesn't even need to be a character from the Sonic franchise. I want to do characters from so many different video game franchises because, well, I love analyzing characters. It's something that I do even outside of YouTube. But with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.